It's time for Drummer Nation.
Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Bobby A, and today I wanted to tell you about how much I really love the Hudson Music digital app. Okay, now, check it out. It's an app that you can get for your device, and you can purchase books from the Hudson Music digital store and have them stored right on your device. The great thing about it is you always have it with you, and any content that might be video related or music related is right there at your fingertips. It's a wonderful resource.
Memphis Drum Shop is the world's premier provider of percussion instruments. With 6 showrooms of gear, mycymbal.com, the Memphis Gong Chamber, and a first-rate repair department, turn to Memphis Drum Shop for all your percussion needs. Who was that crazy man at the end of that? None other than Chad Smith, who recently made news by leaving Sabian to go to Peisty, and he published his thanks and bowed out gracefully. He did it right. If you're going to change companies, Chad Smith did it the right way, and he seems to be a class act, though I don't know him. Speaking of another class act, I'm going to bring up a friend of mine, Mr. Jim Catalano. How are you, Jim?
Hey, hi there, Mike. Good to be here.
It's good to be anywhere at my age.
Yeah.
At our age. Anyway, Jim's agreed to come on today because we're going to be talking about the NAMM Show, which was just this past weekend. And Jim worked for Ludwig for a couple of years. How many?
36.
Yeah, a couple of years.
Yeah.
NAMM Show veteran, and I had a company there, exhibited 10 years in a row. And there's been a lot of change up this year. You know, they skipped it last year because of COVID, which has thrown everything into disarray in every industry. But also, the internet and distribution changes and purchasing patterns have all changed, and this has all been building for some time. So they combined the summer and winter NAMM instead of having summer in Anaheim and summer in Nashville and winter in Anaheim. They just did the summer show in Anaheim, and it was this past weekend. To mixed reviews, they've had as many as 115,000 people show up. This was probably about half of that. What do you think about the new NAMM, Jim?
Well, there's major question really about, the whole NAMM Show concept in general, as far as, still dealing with the pandemic and having such a big event, going. So, NAMM it's a dealer show. I mean, that's really what it was for, from its inception. And, it's changed a lot more into more of a consumer show now.
Yeah, and it used to be consumer was the bad word there. If you're a manufacturer, you have to remember that it's a dealer show, so the dealers are your customers, and the drummers are what they call end users, and they're supposed to have contact to your brand through your dealer network.
Right.
So PASIC, I've always told everybody, I'm sorry, I got the wrong guy in the wrong spot there. PASIC, I've always told everybody, was the one you wanted to go to as a drummer, because it was about being hands-on with the companies, and they were there to talk to you and listen to you, where at NAMM, it's business, man. They're looking for buyer badges. Am I right?
Yeah. And PASIC has also changed a lot, too, because originally PASIC was more of a percussionist show. I mean, Percussive Art Society. Okay, that's what it's called. And now the drum set element of PASIC has very much changed and become, at least 50% of it.
Right.
Which is great for the combo drummer, the drum set guy.
But there are elements of the trade shows now with, like a PASIC, that are changing because of the online availability. The great thing about PASIC is the hands-on nature, hanging out with your friends. You might have lunch with your favorite drummer. Everybody's hands-on. The negative is if it's there, say it's been in Indianapolis mostly for the last many years because they've given PAS a home for their offices. But if you want to go to the show, to choose to see one thing is to choose to not see 5 others, right?
Yeah.
Because they're all...
Yeah, 5, 6 things all happening at the exact same time.
Right. So first of all, 99% of your membership can't afford to go, isn't going to be there. And then once the ones are there, if I want to see Jim Catalano's presentation, I got to miss six others. So the artists are pretty cool about people wandering in and out because everybody wants to see everybody.
Yeah,
But
they do try to split it up in such a way that there's not like two drum set things happening at the same time.
Mhm.
So if you went there and your concept was drum set, you pretty much can go from, each hour one event to the next. But if you were a full percussionist, you might have to miss a timpani clinic or a tambourine clinic if you wanted to see your favorite drum set guy performing the clinic at the same time.
Right. And then the other thing is, as drummers going to it, you can buy stuff at PASIC because the dealers also have booths there, and the manufacturers, though they appear to be selling direct to you, they've made arrangements to cover that through their dealers.
That's
Right?
right. I mean, I've purchased lots of things through over the years at PASIC,
Yeah, me too.
like a rope drum, once that I found there from Cooperman, and I always would,
Same here.
yeah,
Rope drum, exactly. But go ahead.
yeah, all right. But
You,
I
you
think I think the NAMM show, you talk about change, and yes, I was with Ludwig for 36 years, but sometimes I actually say I think I had 1 year of experience 36 different times because it's always changing. The market is always changing, and you have to adapt and you have to grow with it. Originally the NAMM show started off as a dealer show that was actually in hotel rooms at a big hotel, like the Hilton in Chicago, something of
hmm
that nature. And
hmm
then eventually went to convention centers like McCormick Place. I mean, when I first started going to the NAMM show in 1978, because I've actually been in the music industry since 19, for 41, 40, what, where are we at? We're at 43 years now. Okay. And it started off as the summer show was the big show. That was the
Really?
one in Chicago. Yeah, that was the main big show.
Oh, I didn't know
Okay.
that.
The Anaheim show was the winter show, and that was just a much smaller show at the time. And the reason why the summer show was so important was because that was the time when the dealers were planning for their fourth quarter sales. So, for example, things that they were going to sell at Christmas time were going to be the things that were displayed and shown by the dealers at
hmm
uh, at the Summer NAMM Show, which was in Chicago in McCormick Place. But as with Chicago, it was a very difficult show to manage from the standpoint of being an exhibitor because you had to deal with the unions, and hey, I'm a union member. I'm a musicians union member.
Me
Okay,
too.
but you had to deal with a lot of very expensive and big city kinds of union issues that just made it more and more not user friendly to go as a manufacturer to that particular show. So
hmm
eventually the winter show became the main show. And people liked going to that anyways because it got them out of the winter in the East and the Midwest, and they got to go to Southern California, to Anaheim for the show in January, and it was sort of a major hang.
Right.
So
And you could
yeah,
bring your family, and Disneyland was right there. The happiest place
oh
on earth.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the shows also, the NAMM show originally was an order writing show.
Let's
So
talk
you,
about that.
yeah. I mean, when I would go to the NAMM show in the early years, let's just say the 80s right now, okay? You
hmm
went with you had a piece of well, you had a calendar with by half an hour increments of all the meetings that you were going to have to actually write orders. That was the whole idea. You went there to write orders. And this is in a time period before big dealers were using major POs, purchase orders, and things like that, and before computers were dominating everything. So you literally went there with order pads that had triplicate. So you had you had the white sheet, the yellow sheet, and the pink sheet, so that you had the original order that you would write, and then you'd give a copy of it to the dealer so they knew what they ordered, things like that.
hmm
So it was very much an order writing show. And one of the things that we used to do at Ludwig constantly was we would have show specials too. So if you wanted a special price on something or a deal, you could only kind of get it at the show. And so that was sort of a big incentive for dealers to go to those shows.
Right, right. Um, as it shifted, a lot of it came into play because of computers and electronics, right? Like I know when you order, if you're selling to Guitar Center, there's a pretty elaborate online app of their own that you have to go through,
Yeah,
and
in fact, no offense towards Guitar Center because they're an incredible retailer.
mhm,
However, you really couldn't sell Guitar Center at a show. Okay,
exactly, right,
that would be something that just would not happen with their system. But also as the Mon Pod dealer started to decline, and let's say the independent drum shop type dealer, as those declined, and you went to much larger incorporations of dealers, that changed the dynamic of how you were doing business at the shows. So you
right,
were, as you went into the 90s and definitely into the 2000s, now the show was becoming more and more of a let's show you the new product for you to consider the new product and then to send the purchase order for what you saw after you get back from the show.
right. It became something of a meet and greet between manufacturers, artists, and dealers.
Sure. And there's another thing. The acronym for NAMM, National Association of Music Merchants. That was what it's called. However, sometimes NAMM also stood for not available, maybe may. And
Yeah,
so what would happen, and it wasn't just with Ludwig, it was with many dealers or many manufacturers, I should say. They would go there and they would sell their dealers their new products. However, their new products weren't shippable yet.
right.
And so that's why we came up with not available, maybe may.
It
Okay,
took
so
me a while
maybe,
to learn that. I used to say, well, it's not going to be ready for NAM, but what the hell? We've got a few working ones that's what there's going to
yeah.
be. That's our new product.
And,
But
and see, and what that did though, the negative side of what that did is it tied up the dealer's credit line. So the
mhm,
dealer would buy things in January that they weren't going to get until May, which
mhm.
therefore they'd be maxing out their credit line early in January. So they couldn't buy the stuff that they needed to backfill until the new product came out. So
Ah,
that was a big problem to deal with.
mhm.
I was never a big fan of launching products that weren't ready to ship.
Yeah, me neither. Now, I've heard from some dealers who've eventually figured out if they're large enough dealers, their destination locations. The manufacturers go to them. So I
Yeah,
talked to a good one yesterday and I said, what's your take on NAM? And he said, well, and this is a really good dealer. He said, well, we tried a grand experiment one year. We thought, let's just not go and see if it affects our business. And he said the experiment was quite successful.
that's right. And there's some manufacturers that are doing the same thing right now
Right.
because they have chosen not to go to the NAMM show, not to go to a lot of shows. Let's face it, shows are expensive. Now,
Very.
I worked for a large company that had a large 40 by 50-foot booth, square foot booth at the NAMM show, and it took a lot to set it up. Oh yeah, there's some different
Those are
photos.
some of your booths, and I want to take a minute to look at that.
Yeah.
Let's solo some of these. Um, how big is that?
Well,
20.
that there is not a NAMM booth. That's a PASIC booth.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so that
Uh,
would be, a small Percussive Art Society International Convention
right. The
booth.
NAM booths had bigger stuff like
Yeah,
that.
so that would be the 2019 booth there. And that's a 40 by 50 booth, 40 wide by 50 deep.
Hmm.
And those things were incredibly expensive
Oh,
to concept. The space was expensive, but then you had to fly in, well, no, truck in all the gear, of course, get it
hmm,
set up.
hmm.
Uh, and you had carpeting and you had electricity, and it was a lot of planning. Not that that's bad because we had the time to do it. You knew when the NAMM show was going to be. You knew it was going to be somewhere in the middle to end of January, and so you planned accordingly.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
but it was a major investment for large companies like a Ludwig or a Pearl or a Yamaha or
Right.
Tama.
Before
So
we go any further, let me interrupt you for a second. I've got a message from Ronn Dunnett. He's here. Ron, if you want to be on the show, you have to click that link I sent to you, and we'll bring you right in. We'd love to have you here.
yeah,
So hope I'll see you in a minute. Let's go back to some of these booths, because when you look at this stuff that's hanging, look at that, man.
yeah.
That
Now,
whole
what is that? All right, that's a Ludwig drum set that it's not designed to be played necessarily. What we're sort of doing is doing a Neil Peart-esque kind of a drum set, okay?
mhm.
But it's an eye catcher. It's something that was at the top of the stage that had a lot of lighting on it that would just be kind of wild, that would sort of just draw in the eye to get people interested in what in the heck is that? And look at all that. So you
Well,
had all the elements of what you're selling. However, it's just one. We called it the birthday cake, okay,
well,
because it was the top of the birthday cake.
right. But it just shows you how complex this is, and you have to bring that whole. That's hanging from a truss. That's truss isn't there.
Yeah,
You got to bring it,
yeah,
and
and then after the show, you got to sell it.
so you don't have to ship it home, right?
Well, what you end up doing is you split it up into a variety of different
Right.
set configurations from that.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and that's what would actually be sold.
All right. There's your tom rack.
Yeah,
That looks great.
and that's
Um,
to show all the different finishes that were available that particular year and etc.
Here's another guy that knows a thing or two about NAMM. Hey, Ron Dunnett.
Hey,
How
how
are you?
are you?
Very well. Thanks for coming in, man. We're just going through the trials and tribulations of NAMM and what's become of it. NAMM past, present, and future. I used to exhibit with Ron at NAMM, and we were just looking at some of Jim Catalano's booths. But you sat this one out, right, Ron?
Yeah, I did.
And why is that?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me this, and it's more of a personal. I mean, I understand everybody has their own reasons for going to NAMM, and they seem to be pretty diverse. I always used to say, especially during, I'd say, my last 10 years of attending NAMM, that the most creative thing I did all year was think of a reason to go. But I sat out this year, and well, I've actually made a conscious business decision that I've decided to not exhibit at NAMM ever again. And that has more to do with the culture of the organization and what was going on in the middle of a pandemic. And it was a big equation with a lot of numbers. And I thought about my entire experience with NAMM, because I had to take a gestalt view of everything and put it all together. And I came to the realization that I really wasn't getting anything out of the organization as a member. I paid a membership to be part of this thing, and all that did ever was give me license for the privilege of paying them an exorbitant amount of money for 100 square feet of space. And I don't know. I guess when I think of someone like Jim and his experience with NAMM and traveling there, to have the resources of a big corporate company and to not be personally responsible for the guy who's signing all the checks and all of this money going out the door. That
Mhm. Well, I can
that's
vouch for that. It used to beat me to death on the cost of it. We just saw some big exhibits from Ludwig. Let me show you what the little guys did. Find my little exhibits here. Okay, I'm going to show you something interesting here, this is the biggest exhibit I ever had early in my career going to NAMM, right? And these aren't all from NAMM, but you'll get the idea where I'm going. Then that's a 20 by 20. Then we said, okay, there's a 10 by 30. That'll get the job done. Then there's a 10 by 10. That'll get the job done. And then I ended up splitting a booth with Ron Dunnett and Kurt Waltrip that was only 10 by 20, and we had three of us there. So I had like, I don't know, 7 feet, and that got the job done. So eventually, you started figuring out that this was costing an awful lot of money for small companies. And not everybody can afford that for what comes back at you.
For me, it was never really a question of the affordability. It was always worth it, and in one way, or in a bunch of ways. For me, the cost came in different ways that I think even large manufacturers felt, because it ruined Christmas every year, because you're trying to prepare and you're trying to focus on that, and you have hard deadlines, and you're coming from a foreign country. I mean Canada. I'm right on the doorstep, but still, it was. I can't put a price on the amount of stress that it put on me, my family, and ultimately what. And then once you got there, there were all of the other stresses, because unlike Ludwig and all the big corporate companies, I was the guy, not the office girl or boy, who was setting up hotel rooms, setting up flights, rental cars, accommodations, all the logistic stuff, moving the stuff into and out of the venue, which in and of itself, with Freeman and all of the, well, you guys know this, the rules and the policies of NAMM were a moving target year to year. I didn't know what, one year you're rolling in there, it's like, I'm sorry, I can't let you in, you need to have your ID and your driver's license. What? Or, every year it was, okay, let's see what happens. Oh, this time you can't carry your stuff in. This year you can't use this door. You can't come in. This year you have to do this. This year you have to do that.
It was crazy. But let me back up for a second to the ruining Christmas thing. Every little detail is on somebody. And in small companies, it was me, it was Ron. At Ludwig, a large company, it was Jim. And man, if you were missing a silver Sharpie for an artist to sign, that was a 300-yard walk. That was like, everything was in ridiculous distances away, and you were on the hook for every little detail. Where's the cordless drill? Oh shit, we forgot that. Where's this? Yeah. Where's that? And pray to your stuff
and
gets
that's
there
where,
on time.
Yeah, and that's just simply, being the fact that I started going to NAMM. Well, let's just talk about the big NAMMs. Let's just say when I started at Ludwig for 36 years in a row, you start to learn from each one. You do, and then you make a checklist. And so that I was all about checklists. And when I was getting ready to retire, there was a young lady that was going to be taking my place, and they allowed her to shadow me for a whole year. And that was really incredibly invaluable for her. But we made, checklists of everything that had to be thought through. And she was, absolutely amazed. Oh my goodness, there's so much to think about. And then if there's going to be like a corporate event, like a luncheon or a dinner or some sort of a reception or something, that's a whole nother thing. Now you're dealing with the hotel and trying to establish that. But, the unfortunate part was, the pandemic ruined that shadowing, because she didn't survive the pandemic as far as all the changes that companies went through.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, so now I get calls every once in a while, even though I've been retired for 3 years, since we're back. So that since Ludwig is back to going to shows, I still get calls like, hey, Jim, what about this? Well, what did you do here? What did you do there? And, I'm gladly will advise them and help, because I realize they have no point of reference.
Right.
So because I did it for so long. See, even when I was the marketing manager for Ludwig, I always handled all the trade show stuff. So, you get good at it after a while. It becomes second nature to you.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about one thing. I'm going to throw out is a couple of words that you'll recognize, and then we'll go to some positives. NAMMfluenza and NAMMthrax. We all know what that means, right? And this was pre-COVID. Pre-COVID. Go ahead.
Pre-COVID. That's right. Well, I used to get sick all the time, generally after NAMM. I can probably count maybe 5 or 6 times that I was sick after the NAMM show. but I actually was sick for the NAMM Show 2017.
Remember that?
I missed it. I was there. I did set up. I worked the first day, and then I was gone the next 3 days, where I had Namthrax. But then NAMM 2018, the company sent me to teach percussion to college students and to band directors in China for a week, 9 days prior to the NAMM Show.
Hmm.
And I got sick in China. And, and so I ended up
No way.
missed the entire NAMM Show that year. I never even flew out. And so, those are the things, of getting sick, because, you're shaking at a NAMM Show, you're shaking literally hundreds of hands per day.
From people all over the world.
That's right.
You know what? I have to. This is one of the things that, pissed me off about NAMM, because I was one of those guys who got sick every time. Didn't matter what I did. There was a year there that I said, "Hey, don't be offended. My policy is I'm bumping elbows with everybody." Still got sick. And you know what? For an organization that, when your membership has a word, a colloquial, whatever you want to call it, like Namthrax, you think it might register, and that you might do something to try and protect your members and the guests and all the people that were coming. But I think back of all the years that I went there and trying to find, if you could find a hand sanitizer dispenser, if it happened to work, I'm like, oh, that's great. I just put my hand under an empty machine that 50 million hands have already been under. It's like, why didn't I just put my hand in the urinal? And I saw that. I posted that, rather, my cynical NAMM parody video asking them to come to Summer NAMM. And I remember my last NAMM show, I went on one of those rare bathroom breaks that I got. I went in and stopped at the thing and I looked at the floor of the bathroom in Hall C and went, oh, there must be, did a toilet overflow or something? It's like, no, that is just the accumulation of urine being tracked around. And I actually went outside into the parking lot. And yeah, it's funny until you go, I'm paying big bucks.
Money, yeah. Yeah.
I gave up my Christmas to come here, and these guys can't even manage basic, cleanliness for people. Nobody cares about that. We're all about, hey, we're going to give you awards. Hey, you know what? You bought 1,000 square feet of trade show space, and your products are going to get some big awards this year. We want to invite you down here. Meanwhile, Hall C, which would otherwise be empty without the 10 by 10 booths and all the entrepreneurs, who I was very proud of. I wasn't the only one. Whatever, guys, go ahead and do it. We'll be sending in the sound police to make sure that you don't so much.
Okay, you just hit the magic word. I was touching on one other negative before we get to the positives, and that is the volume. The sheer volume of the place. The standing noise in the hall is 85 decibels. And they shut people down for playing. That's another thing people have to realize. It's not performances aren't prohibited, so it's not about sitting down.
Oh, no,
and
that's
playing.
wrong. No, that is wrong.
Go ahead.
That is absolutely wrong. My performances are permitted. It just depends on how much money and how much real estate you bought.
Yeah, I see
You know
you're
what I'm
saying.
talking about. You can go to a show 3 years in a row and manufacture product on the show floor with a hammer and an anvil. And you can do that throughout the entire show until all of your neighbors are shell-shocked from the sound. And that's okay, because you guys, that is one hell of a booth you got there. And it doesn't matter that the 10 by 10s around you are suffering and having to deal. By Sunday, I couldn't even put a sentence together.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I used to have electronic ear protection that got from some Etymotic that was great. But let's go to some positives, and there are many, and I'll tell you what they are, Ron, because you're responsible for a big one up, which is the camaraderie and the friendship throughout the industry. I know you guys from NAMM and all the others that we can all name, and Ron every year did a drumsmith dinner that had, depending on the year, up to 90 people there.
Let me just tell you something about the drumsmith dinner.
All right.
It is the NAMM Show's longest running community event. Did that drumsmith dinner for 19 years.
Wow.
Zero acknowledgement from the NAMM organization.
Isn't that crazy?
Not that I needed that, but and I loved. You want to talk about the positives? That was always the highlight. That was always the highlight for me. It was like preparing a wedding every year, and on top of all the usual stress, there was the reservations. I'm on the hook for the entire. It's a over a $2,000 tab.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always trying to find the balance between filling the room so that I could at least break even, or having to kick in $200 or $300 or $400 because there weren't enough people, and I was still on the hook for it. Or in some cases, and I'm sure you know what this was like, having the room overfilled and packed, which was, in spite of how uncomfortable it could be from time to time, those were the best ones.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about one of the reasons to go to NAMM? That was it.
That was a great one, Ron. We all appreciate it. But also, there were events at night. I remember there was a jazz club nearby called Steamers in Fullerton, and we would rent out part of it and have Jeff Hamilton play, or Ralph Peterson or Joey D would be there, and we'd have drummers with him, and that was cool, you know?
Those are among my fondest memories. Jeff Hamilton at Steamers. Are you kidding? Ralph Peterson there. Oh my God, it was so great. Hey, I want to ask Jim, in all of those years, I don't think you ever came to a drumsmith, did you? No, I understand, but I'm like going, I don't think Jim ever made it to that. I know Packard did. He made it to a couple, but
I was technically never officially invited. But on the other side, when I was at a NAMM show, I had so many, I'll use the word corporate things that I had to do, that it was just probably a given that I wouldn't, even if I was invited, I probably wouldn't be able to go, because I had to do the entertaining of my own dealers.
Right.
And, and another big thing about the NAMM show is the NAMM show was an American show. Okay. It was American dealers primarily. And then a couple big international customers would come to the show. But then more and more people, say from South America, Central America, Mexico, they would start coming to the show. But then as the years went by, it became a truly international show where all of your key distributors that you had throughout Europe and Asia and the South America, Central America, they would all be there. And so now you had a new problem in that you had to work them all into your meetings and to your presentations, because now you had more than just the American dealer to talk to. You had international. What made it difficult was, especially in the late 80s and the 90s, we used to go from NAMM, and I'd fly directly to San Antonio for the Texas Music Educators Convention, which was a band director convention. And then I would fly directly from San Antonio to Frankfurt, because the Frankfurt Music Messe was actually in February, back in the 80s and the early 90s. It became a spring show later on. That's what you guys are familiar with. But because I'm a lot older, I dealt with it, and so talk about getting sick. If you got sick, you had to power through, because you had 3 shows in a row you had to cover, and you were gone for like a month. Okay, so that was always a problem. But the bigger problem was that you met with, as the years went by, you met with all your international distributors at the NAMM show. And then, let's just say, even 2 months later, now you're meeting with them at the Frankfurt Fair, Frankfurt Music Messe. The thing is that nothing much has changed in what you had to sell. Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of like, hey, remember all that stuff I showed you and I talked to you about at the NAMM show? Yeah, same story now. And so in some ways, you were going to these 2 shows, but you were seeing very few new customers at the Frankfurt show because you already saw them at the NAMM show.
Right. Well, let's take a minute here, because I know I was talking the other night with some friends, and they said, when you look around and you don't see the old guard, you are the old guard.
That was me.
That was Ron. Let's take a minute and think about all the great personalities and characters that we've lost in the last few years. I'll
Oh, you
throw
know
out a.
what,
Go ahead, Mike.
Mike, I was just thinking as you were leading up to that, I'm like, going, this would be a great time to mention, and it's always stuck in my craw again. Um, NAMM, an organization like this that really didn't take the health and safety of its membership
I know what you're going to say.
seriously. And, we had Joe Hibbs
Yeah.
pass away, sitting in an airport, walking pneumonia that he got at the NAMM show. And I believe also, although I could be wrong on this, but it seems to me that Remo Belli was also, that was sort of the complications from illness that he got while at the NAMM show eventually led, to that becoming worse. And if that was my organization and someone was making jokes about the fact that, that there was anthrax, I'd be like, you know what? Instead of a NAMM water bottle on everybody's booth along with their Freeman bill on Sunday, I'm going to be there Wednesday night, and I'm going to give everybody a NAMM branded bottle of hand sanitizer and an instruction sheet on how to stay safe during a trade show. Instead, what this organization does is, in the middle of a pandemic, they struggle and do everything they can because they think, and there were a lot of signatories on that letter that they put out, no, the best thing to do right now in the middle of the pandemic is to bring people together. And if you're wondering what the straw was on the camel's back in my case, that was it. I want no part of that organization. They need to be, they're on their way to becoming Music Mesa, rest in peace, and they just don't know it yet. Dead show walking.
Okay, I point taken, and I couldn't argue with you on most of that. But let's go back to what I wanted to do, which is to
Yep.
point out some
Sorry.
of these
Had to
characters.
get that
No,
out.
that's all right. No, everybody speaks their mind, and I wouldn't change it. Some of the guys I can think of: Bob Zildjian, Remo Belli, Roy Burns, Johnny Craviotto,
Vic Firth.
Vic Firth, Lenny DiMuzio, Jim Chapin, Freddie
Coffin.
Gruber, Jim Coffin. Those are off the top of my head. I'm sure there's some more. You guys?
Yep.
Sandy Feldstein,
Yeah.
in the publishing side of things, but he was an icon, and
Joe Hibbs, the aforementioned.
yeah.
There's
Um,
nothing better on a Wednesday, walking around during setup or that first Thursday morning and crossing paths with Joe Hibbs and Roy Burns, just hanging together. And just, I remember those times and being wise enough, in spite of my own ignorance, to know that the best thing I can do in the presence of those two gentlemen was to shut up. And even if it was Roy telling a joke,
Yeah.
or Joe just going, so what else?
I hear you. Shut up and listen good when you're around those
Yeah,
guys. And
yeah.
I really learned. I got
for
so
me,
much
I would-
encouragement from those guys. Go ahead, Jim.
I would say my favorite part of the show was actually the setup.
Mhm.
And that was,
Mhm.
I love, and for Ludwig, now I would get there on Sunday because my display had to start going up on Sunday, and for a
Okay.
show that doesn't start till Thursday. Okay. And then we spent all day Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday setting up the show, setting the product. I mean, it was a big deal. It was a 40 by 50 booth.
Mhm.
And so those 3 days, 4 days really of the setup show part of it was really my favorite part. But it was also, you're hanging with your guys.
Right.
And for me, I was all about the Ludwig team. I mean, I was always the unifier. And we went through a lot of new people too. Okay, so you got new people coming in, and I was that guy that would try to bring everyone together, as let's just say like the team leader. Okay. And you're having lunches and dinners together, you're going out, you're hanging.
Yeah.
And
It's
you're
also the
trying
least. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, you're trying to set up without a lot of stress and pressure too.
Right.
Okay. And it was sort of my thing was to make sure that I went around and, is everybody busy? Is everybody doing something? What are you doing? What are you working on? so that we can, keep going, because the sooner we can finish this up, say on Wednesday at noon, then maybe we can have some free time. And
Right.
so the goal was always by Wednesday afternoon, can we go over to downtown Disney tonight for dinner? Can we have some fun as opposed to working up to the very, very end? In the early days of my Ludwig time, it was a different era. Even though I was the marketing manager, I was also the young guy. I was kind of the grunt, if you catch my drift, for lack of a better word. And I didn't have enough people to help us in setting up. So there was times that I was there till 10 o'clock at night. Even after they emptied the hall, I'm still setting things up and tuning. And then as time went on, the Ludwig team got better. We got more people involved, and everyone was engaged. And then it became very much a team effort throughout most of the 90s and the 2000s. It was always a team effort that I really appreciated it.
I have to say, and I'm going to interject, there were two rituals that one I wouldn't necessarily call a ritual, but the first one, I have to say, Jim, just hearing you talk about this, and it wasn't NAMM, but one of my fondest memories was walking around the show floor at Music Mesa, the opening morning, and invariably, in all the quiet before, like the storm, the war, I'd hear this beautiful music, and sure enough, it was Jim playing away on the vibes or the marimba, and it was like, I'm gonna hold this moment for a very long time.
And that was after I finished vacuuming. Just
yeah.
So you know.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Exactly.
I got pictures of you. I'm like going, Jim, you forgot the apron again.
But you see, the best part of the NAMM show for me was, look, I had my last 15 years were, let's just say, tenuous, okay? In that I never knew, because bosses were changing year to year and stuff. I never knew if I was going to survive till the next NAMM show. And so I started a little thing called, let me get the last photo that I'm ever going to take at the NAMM show, because this is probably my last show. And Ron and Michael Hackala, also from who was a photographer, they would come over and they would take my last photo. And it became like a self-fulfilling prophecy that if I didn't take the last photo, maybe it really would have been my last one. But
there was even a time there, one of the shows where you weren't there because you were sick. I had Brian sit in and stand in, and I photoshopped your face from another picture on there. I'm like going, there's no damn way I'm missing this thing. Yeah, we're gonna make it happen one way or the other.
I had my moment.
I remember that.
I have my solitude where there was a time I just sat down at the kit, one of our booths, and closed my eyes, and I was just playing very softly, not paying attention or anything. And Hamilton walks over and he says, "Washes off the dust of the day," which is what Art Blakey said about playing. Washes off the dust of the day. I said, man, you knew exactly where I was. That's what I was doing.
Yeah.
You know, not showing off, not exhibiting any booth. Just leave me alone. Let me just let's play some time for a minute by myself, and I'll feel a lot better.
We talk about performances on the booth. Ludwig's most successful performance on the booth was from Clayton Cameron, who would come on and he would play his brushes, and it wasn't really, the volume wasn't that great, but yet he would draw a huge crowd of people, because he's just such an awesome musician, and the way he plays brushes and stuff.
He's a showman with them, yeah.
Very much, but it was really wonderful and stuff too. Of course, it clogged up the booth, so no business, no commerce was happening during that time. And
how would we
get
know?
some flack on that?
How would we know?
Yeah,
but that was another positive. Is my son Kevin would be with me and say, "Dad, is that Jim Keltner?" I said, "Yeah." You'd look up and it'd be, because everybody checks out everybody's booths, right? We're all friends in this industry, so it doesn't matter that Keltner is with this company and Lenny White is with that company, and Erskine is with this one, and they're all palling around, and you look up and there's 12 famous drummers in your booth, and you realize how wonderful that is. On the other hand, it doesn't make you a nickel.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, Ludwig, what we did, and we did this all the way up to the end, starting it very early. We always did autograph sessions on the Friday and the Saturday of
Hmm.
the NAMM show with key artists. It got to the point where we had so many artists that came in that would literally, there'd be the Friday crew of maybe 20 artists and then the Saturday crew. And, that meant you had to print off autograph sheets. You had to have Sharpies, some silver ones, some black ones. You had to make sure all the details were done. And then you had to order tables and stools for them to sit on.
Been
It
there,
was a
brother.
big it was a big deal, but it drew a lot of people to the booth. And even if there may not have been, like I said, commerce happening right then and there, they were getting to see some of their favorite drummers. And then when we were just working the booth one day, you'd see an entourage with Stevie Wonder walk by, or
Exactly.
you'd see George Benson over at the Ibanez booth, just talking to people, hanging out. John Stamos was a Ludwig guy. He played Ludwig drums. And he would come to the booth, and that was always a big deal. It was always cool when he would come on the booth, and he knows me a little bit. He's still in my phone, and we'd always get a picture together. And I would post it on Facebook when we were social media savvy by that point. And people would say, "Uncle Jesse, holy cow! I can't believe you're there with Uncle Jesse."
Yeah. It's how much they remember that. I had a neighbor who was the guy who did Kevin the Robot. And
Oh,
he was still known 20 years later, wow, you're Kevin the Robot.
yeah.
It's amazing how those things touch people. Well, gentlemen, I think we've covered NAMM inside and out. And for anybody watching, I did 100 interviews, and I don't want to do any more interviews. Everybody and their brother's doing interviews, and it's taking advantage of the artist, I think. And there's no money in any of this for anybody. So I'm going to start doing these Drummer Nation Live, where I have people come on. My friends will come on, and we'll talk about a topic, or maybe we'll just shoot the shit about nothing. But I really appreciate you guys coming on board, and we'll do it again sometime, okay?
Very good. Good seeing you, Ron.
Good to see you, Jim.
Good
Thanks,
seeing you
Michael.
guys.
Thank you,
All
Mike.
right. Your
Hey.
mics are still on, but I'm going to go to a spot and take it out. All right, everybody. This has
Bye,
been Drummer
everyone.
Nation Live. Thank you, Ronn Dunnett and Jim Catalano, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. I was distracted because it looks like my video ended. Here we go. It's time for Drummer Nation.
Thank you for watching.
Bye, everybody.